Hello. Let's do Zecher Bereshis more on Tzfardea. We know that when Paro went running to or sent a message to Moshe and to Aaron to come back, so he could ask them to daven to Hashem to take away the Tzfardea, he mentioned specifically remove the noise, the call, the sound of the frogs. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the calling of the frogs. The frogs and toads have voices, and they make a variety of croaks, trills, grunts, and whistles, and each one is unique to its species. These calls are a great benefit for them. It's useful for three things. They can defend their territories. By calling, they let the other males know that this is my territory, stay out of it. They can attract a mate and let the female know where they are by calling. And thirdly, they can recognize their own species, because all the like we said, each species has its own call. Sometimes there are a number of different frogs or toads that live in the same area, but they can recognize each other for mating by the call. And really, the ultimate purpose of all these three things is ultimate for mating and having more frogs and toads. So Hashem gave them a special design. He gave them what's called a vocal sac, which I'm going to show you pictures of soon. And those sacs inflate like a balloon, and that's what helps to produce the loud croak. How loud are they? Well, our American bullfrog, he produces a croak. When a number of them are together, you can hear it literally a mile away. And very deep, croak they have. But then there's a little tiny, now you're talking about a 6 to 8 inch frog. But then you have a little tiny spring peeper, a tree frog, that's only a little bit more than an inch long, its body. And a bunch of them together also can be heard a mile away. And the spring peepers are particularly exciting, in my opinion, because they are one of the first sounds of spring. Just like the American robin bird is one of the first signs that spring is finally coming after a long, snowy, cold winter. So the sound of spring peepers is also a great siman, one of the earliest simanim of the coming spring. It's really exciting to hear. Now, when a frog sings, if you have the ability to look at its throat, you'll see that the frogs only make their calls with their mouths closed. They draw in air through the nose, and then they have their voice sac swells up at the throat, the skin expands, and the singing begins. And he closes the opening to his nose and forces the air up and down his throat. So the top picture is a spring peeper. The picture is actually about 3 times the size of the actual frog, what it really is. And the middle picture is a squirrel tree frog. And the bottom one you see is a horn frog that has 2 sacs. And the other one is an oak toad. And usually there's a bunch of them together. There's a whole group of them together that are making these calls to call out for a mate or to define the territory. And the sound is actually deafening. As a matter of fact, one of these frogs, the little oak toad I should say, his sound is so loud that the naturalist that studied him, he gave it a nickname. He called it the boilerplate factory frog, because it was so loud, the sounds. Okay, we'll look at some more of them. It's interesting, you see they have different colors. Now this one over here, there's no English name for it, but you see its sac is actually below its belly. So it's not by its mouth, interestingly enough. And this one is called the barking tree frog. We don't see his sac, but his sounds very, very much like a dog that's barking. That's why I put the picture in. This is another small one here. This is a marsh frog of Europe and Africa and Asia that has 2 little sacs instead of 1. Um, and this is a gray tree frog. And this one is an interesting one. This is called a carpenter's frog because its sound sounds like the distant blow of a hammer smacking against something. Or smacking against a nail, I guess. This is called the western chorus frog from Kansas. They call it a chorus frog because that's what it sounds like, one big chorus when they're all singing together. The green toad of Europe and North Africa has a sustained trilling croak. The largest of the North American tree frogs has a deep bark for a croak, and that's what we said already, the barking tree frog. The American green tree frog is said to croak more during the rainy weather, and it's actually regarded locally as a weather forecaster, because when it's croaking louder, they know it's going to rain. The spring peepers, as I said, that's one of the first signs of spring, which sounds like a little tinkling of bells. The cricket frog has a high-pitched clicking call. That's why it's called a cricket. And the running frog of Africa has a croak that sounds like the popping sound of a cork. The midwife toad has a soft sound like that of a tiny bell. And that's what it is. And then when the breeding season is over, for each type of frog, then it stops its croaking. And this is a picture of a frog called a Tungara frog, which has an interesting vocal sac. Very colorful one. So I don't know exactly which frogs they were that jumped all over Paro and his people, but you can bet that Hashem gave them loud croaks, and it was driving them really crazy. Okay, a good Shabbos, a good Yom Tov.